So section 3, we studied firm has a monopsony power in labor market, for example, right? Similarly, section point 4 is labor supplier. For example, union. Labor union has monopoly power. Monopoly power, right? Section 3, firm has a monopsony power, right? So firm, some purchase, buyers of labor has a monopsony power, right? Suppliers of labor has a monopoly power. That is subsection 4, monopsony power over the wage rate. That is explained in figure 14-15, right? Figure 14-15. So that is labor supply curve. Labor supply curve by Hao-Zhou, right? So monopoly power over sellers of labor. When a labor union is monopolist, right? Labor supply curve is like this. Then they face, right? Some demand curve, labor demand curve like this. When a labor union is monopolist, it chooses among points on the buyer's demand for labor, DL, right? That is demand for labor, right? The sellers can maximize number of workers hired. How can I say? Demand for labor. How can I say? So, that is equal to MRPL, right? Wage rate. Okay, just like this. That is demand for labor or price curve, wage rate curve, right? And that is marginal revenue curve, for example, marginal revenue curve. Marginal revenue curve is at each amount of quantity of labor, marginal revenue smaller than price of labor, wage rate, right? It's like this. That is marginal revenue curve. When the market, labor market is perfectly competitive, demand intersects supply at point A, right? And the wage rate is equal to W star, competitive wage rate. And labor employment, equilibrium quantity of labor is L star, right? L star. The quantity of labor earned and maximized rents earned by employee is determined by, but labor union has a monopoly power, then what happens? Marginal revenue equal to supply curve. So then that is L1, right? L1, okay? They choose equilibrium labor quantity where SCL intersects marginal revenue and receives higher wages rate. This one, that is W1, right? In this case, they receive wage rate, higher wage rate, right? W1. That is explained here. The quantity of labor L1 then maximize the rent earned by employees is determined by the intersection of marginal revenue and supply labor curve. Union members will receive a wage rate of W1, right? Union members. Labor union has a monopoly power, wage rate increase, right? That is W1. And labor employment decrease. Okay? That is the effect of our labor union. Can you understand? Finally, if the union wishes maximize total wages paid to workers, right? Maximize total wages, right? W. If profit, the objective function of union is maximize WL, simply talking. That should be maybe near here, like this. The area maximized, that is W2. Okay, in figure 14.15. At that point, the marginal revenue to the union will be zero. Marginal revenue marginal revenue, I'm sorry, not this one. Marginal revenue is equal to 0, so this one. If W maximize total revenue, okay? So my figure is different from our textbook because of a different shape of marginal revenue, right? So this one. So our textbooks graph is like this. To avoid confusions, right? For example, marginal revenue and DL marginal revenue and supply. So that is W star, competitive wage rate, right? And wage rate W1 when only labor union maximize wage rate of some unionized workers, okay? Then labor employment decrease and wage rate increase. If the purpose of union is maximizing WL, this one, then marginal revenue is equal to 0. So that is W2. That is a graph of our textbook. Next slide. This one is also very important. Unionized and non-unionized worker, figure 14.6. Wage discrimination in unionized and non-unionized sectors. When a monopolistic union, anyway, union has monopoly power in labor market, right? When a monopolistic union raises the wages in unionized sector of economy from W to, okay, the graph. Figure 14.16. Yes. This one, what can I say? You demand for, that is demand for unionized worker, labor demand for unionized workers, and demand for non-unionized workers. Okay? Then total labor demand is summation of this one plus this one, like this, right? So like this, that is demand for labor. For example, also we assume the labor supply constant in the shown the whatever. Then competitive wage rate is intersection of demand for labor and supply curve. That is W star. At this W star, unionized workers receive this amount of, right? At this unionized workers' employment is this one. Non-unionized workers' employment is this one. This one plus this one is total this one. Okay? Now, a monopolistic union wants to raise the wages in the unionized sector of the economy from W to star to, so now unionized workers want higher wages, okay? Want higher wages using monopoly power, okay? So unionized workers' wage rate is increased like this. Then what happened? Non-unionized workers' employment change in unionized workers decrease by this amount. Okay? Then, that is change in non-unionized, just unionized worker. Then, non-unionized workers should increase by this amount to restore equilibrium. Okay? So, this one, non-unionized workers' labor employment is this one originally. Now, change in unionized workers also same to this one. So, same to this one. That is change in non-unionized workers. This one positive, this one is negative. Decrease in unionized workers because of higher wage rate should be replaced by non-unionized workers by the same amount of labor, right? Then what happened? So, like this, non-unionized workers, employment increase, then wage rate of non-unionized workers should decrease. If labor union want higher wages, then labor employment decrease, right? This one should be compensated by increase in non-unionized worker. That only happens when lower wage rate for non-unionized workers, right? So there is a gap between the two. Okay? So look at this again. So when a monopolist union raised the wages in the unionized sector of the economy from W star to WU, employment in that sector falls, decrease, as shown by the movement along the demand curve DU. For the total supply of labor given by SAR to remain unchanged, the wage in the non-unionized workers must fall from W star to WNU. I already explained, as shown by the movement along the demand curve DNU. Okay? Now think about regular worker and temporary worker, for example, right? Regular workers' wage increase or unionized workers' wage rate higher than non-unionized worker or just contracting workers, right? Why that happen? You have to understand system, right? So in basic idea of economics is optimal labor demand condition. Labor wage rate is equal to contribution to production process. That is VMPL or MRPL, right? Unionized workers want to increase their wage rate higher than MRPL. That's what happened. This one should be compensated by lower wage rate for the other workers. Can you understand? That is the economic perspective to look at the wage gap between unionized worker and non-unionized worker, right? Then, now think about Korea. What happened now? Unionized workers, so labor union is closely related to political struggle in Korea. That is quite different from United States and West European countries. And the labor union argued that wage rate for non-unionized workers or contract workers should be same to theirs. Okay? Now think about then, what happened? Non-unionized workers' wage rate is same to this one, then this one, right? At WU. That is unionized workers' employment. At this WU, non-unionized workers' labor employment. In sum, this one. Total employment is this one. At this wage rate, right? At this wage rate, total labor demand by firm is this amount, but supply this one, so unemployment happens. Can you understand? So labor unions' arguments that to raise non-unionized workers' wage rate is nonsense from the perspective of economics, right? So the background of their argument is that firms exploit laborers. So all the laborers receive lower wage rate than their contribution to production process. That is a political argument by laborers. Sometimes that is true, but if that is not the case, their argument to raise non-unionized workers or contracting workers is nonsense, no basis. Okay? Next slide, example 14.6. The decline of private sector unionism. For several decades, the membership of labor unions has been declining. Same thing happened in Korea, particularly in the private sector. How have unions responded to this important dynamic? Historically, union wages have been higher than the wages of their non-union counterparts. Same in Korea. During the past 2 decades, a number of economic forces have led to further narrowing of the union, non-union wage differentials. Right? So in past 2 decades, the wage gap between this one, unionized worker and non-unionized worker, showing decreasing trend. Okay? So there is 2 reasons for this. Number one, the the demand for unionized workers has become increasingly elastic over time as firms have found it easier to substitute capital for skilled labor in the production process. Right? So number one reason is substitution, substitutability between skilled labor or labor and capital. Right? Unionized workers' wage rate increase. Then firm wants to replace skilled workers to capital stock, machine or something. So automation increase. That is number one reason. Right? So another reason is, number two reason is globalization, impact of globalization. Right? Globalization meant that many companies were able to organize their production process so as to hire non-union laborers. Because of globalization, now United States or European companies have have opportunity, right, option to hire non-unionized foreign workers or foreign countries rather than hiring domestic unionized workers. Okay, that is possible. So because of this, labor unions forced to receive higher wages, showing decreasing trend. But Korea faced same thing. But the Korean labor union linked to a politics group argued that they want to regulate these two things, right? So they oppose, they argue against automation process, production process, automation. They oppose automation. They do not they want to make some regulation regarding substitutability between labor and capital, right? And the other reason is some firms really oppose to firms' decision, right, to produce same cost, for example, in foreign country. That means employment of non-unionized foreign workers, non-unionized workers in foreign. Can you understand? In that sense, Korean large conglomerates have a lot of problem from the perspective of profitability of business. Okay, can you understand? Okay, next slide. Anyway, the decline of private sector unionism, figure 14.7, we can show the union workers as a percentage of total showing decreasing trend over the past 30 years, decreasing and decreasing. Right? Now we go final slide, example 14.7, wage inequality revisited. Wage inequality revisited. In example to chapter 2.2, we explained how the rapid growth in the demand for skilled relative to unskilled labor has been partly responsible for the growing inequality in the distribution of income in the United States. Wage gap between skilled and unskilled laborers, right? While the demand for skilled labor has steadily increased, the supply of skilled labor has not grown as much, right? Skilled labor, unskilled labor, right? Demand for skilled labor increased greatly, but supply of skilled labor is limited. So wage rate of skilled labor increase, but unskilled labor, right? So unskilled labor basically means high school graduate workers. Unskilled labor demand decreasing trend or same, right? But supply of unskilled labor increased greatly in the United States. Why? Immigrant workers from overseas. Then what happened? Wage rate of unskilled labor is constant or almost constant or decreasing like this. Because of this, the wage gap between skilled and unskilled increase. We studied this already, right? From 1980 through the present, college graduate relative wages have grown. So, based on this, same history, right? In the United States, right, from 1980s, college graduate relative wages grown, right? So college graduate workers is skilled labor, simply talking, right? Unskilled labor is their schooling years less than 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 3 plus 3, so 12 years. So high school graduate workers, for example, right? The wage gap increase and increase. So wage rate of skilled labor over wage rate of unskilled labor is 1.5, for example. And right? That was 1.5 times that of high school graduate workers in 1980s. But by 2009, this ratio is increased to 1.95, almost 2. Right? That is 2, for example, 1.95. Can you understand? The wage gap between skilled and unskilled, or high school graduate workers and college graduate workers expand, showing expanding trend. Right? So by 2000, this ratio increased to 1.95. By 2010, the median weekly salary of those with college degree but no further education was $1,000, higher than $1,000, whereas those with high school degree earned only $626. Moving beyond college to further professional degree, right? So average salaries for high school workers or high school less than high school workers is, for example, what happened? In 2010, that is how much? Receive $626. Okay? So wage rate of college graduate workers was $1,036, right, in the United States, 3A, right? And workers who receive more education than this one, or a master degree or a PhD degree, right? Their wage rate, we said that is professional workers, right? Unskilled labor, skilled labor, professional workers, scientists, engineers, like this, right? Professional workers' wage rate is $1,610. Okay? So this one is like this. Why that happen? Economics thing, right? So we know that wage rate is equal to price of the good multiplied by marginal product of labor. That is value of marginal product of labor or marginal revenue product, isn't it? Because of differences in NPR. NPR of high school workers, college workers, professional workers, different, right? More education means more productive. Can you understand? Right? That is really important thing. But in Korea, believe that just the degree matter. But that is not true. In the United States or European countries, education is really serious. Right? The purpose of education is increasing your job skills. Right? This job skills is just almost general job skills, right? General job skills is problem solving skills, or critical thinking skills, right? So higher one means higher productivity, so receive higher wages. That is a basic idea. But in Korea, we don't have this kind of idea. Just I graduate college, so I have to receive higher wage. That is not true. You have to increase your capability or productivity. Okay? Education clearly pays. Workers with more education not only receive higher salaries, but they are also much less likely to lose their jobs. So these three groups have different unemployment rate. More education means less unemployment rate, right? Less education means more unemployment, higher unemployment rate, okay? So that is really important thing. The growth in the demand for skilled workers has occurred primarily within industries where computers have become increasingly useful. In the United States, so if some college graduate students who receive computer science lecture have no problem to be employed, right? That kind of syndrome happened already 20 years before, right? But recently, Korea followed that kind of employment pattern. So I strongly recommend for students to take a computer-related course. Now look at the final graph. Wage inequality revisited. That is median weekly earnings, right? Higher education, higher wage rate. Lower schooling years, lower wage rate. Okay? Also, this one is unemployment rate. If you have a professional degree, unemployment rate is 1.5%. You graduate college, about 3%. You less than a high school diploma, 8% unemployment, right? More salary, less unemployment rate, like this. That is a really important figure. That is usually this kind of thing used in orientation of freshmen in the United States. Okay, so finally, I'd like to say just one miscellaneous thing. Doctoral degree and professional degree, two things are different. Okay, professional degree means MBA or JD. Okay, in law, business, or something. That is professional, or teachers, right? So professional degree. Professional degree is related with applied, job-related, some discipline, like business and administration, laws, or medicine, or like this, right? Usually a PhD degree means some degrees in some pure sciences, like political science, economics, like this. Two things are quite different things. In undergraduate, usually they focus on, okay, so this one, professional degree and doctoral degree. So education, earnings, and employment in figure 14-18. Median weekly earnings were much higher and average unemployment rates were much lower for workers with higher levels of education. Under the assumption that college education should have been done seriously, differently from Korea. Okay? That is a figure Western students learned at the freshman's orientation. Okay? Okay, I'd like to stop here.